Welcome, Alexander, my old friend.
Thank you,
And
my friend.
thank you. You know, you are my second victim in this kind of scheme. My
Yeah,
sort of, what do you call that? This American way to recruit a seller, but you're not actually a seller. You recruit another member. Anyway,
there you go.
anyway,
Oh yeah. Like pyramid scheme, kind of.
yeah, I'm avoiding that
Yeah.
word actually. Today, we are going to
So
talk about your favorite books. One of
yeah,
two of a series. I think it's tetralogy or trilogy. And then
there's four books. Yeah.
four books. Yeah, this is a continuation of. I see this as a continuation of our lunches and our previous project, because as I said to Paul, my first victim in this scheme, is that I wish, because the lunches were so random, and then sometimes it's really good moment. You really want, when you go home, you repeat it in your mind, and then you wish it's available on YouTube because you can then play it. And so this is my way of some kind of doing that. So let's start with those books that I have read. Dan Simmons' Hyperion, the first one, and then
Mhm.
number two is The Fall of Hyperion.
Yeah.
As anyone who
Uh,
probably can guess, this is a sci-fi, but I will have some ideas that is surprising for me, but I can say it later.
yeah. I mean, these are books that I um was randomly exposed to the first one in 2000. I was given a copy that I have here somewhere. At that point, it was already falling apart. I think like four people had owned it and had sort of read through it a lot. And it really captured my imagination because it is incredibly well written, especially for a debut novel. The first one is there, and it is a Hugo Award winning novel as well, and well deserved. So, but it is, yeah. So we'll contain ourselves to the two first ones, which is sort of actually one story, um, and yeah, it's fascinating, but it contains. It's not just sci-fi, right? It contains so many elements
Yes,
that it is,
exactly.
yeah. So I love it, and I'm really glad to have exposed even more people to it. So,
So I'm your victim as well.
oh, of course, yeah.
But uh,
So
I will ask you to introduce this book later. But now I really want to know something before that. How you said you discover or being exposed with these books in the early 2000. How
yeah,
were you as a reader at that time? Do you read or
I
what?
didn't read much. Not at all. I was fresh out of our mandatory military service. Um, I'd moved to Oslo, trying to attend school for sort of. I think it was actually creation of web pages, but this is like HTML level. There is no JavaScript, barely PHP. Um, and one of the other students that I became a good friend with sort of advised me to read that book while we were talking, just while playing. I think it was like Sega Dreamcast games or something in his apartment. So it's a really nerdy scenario. But I didn't read much. I read um, a lot of Terry Pratchett books at that time.
Uh-huh.
So
Yes.
Discworld was really sort of my thing, and I was collecting Terry Pratchett books Well, I still do, but I was already starting that collection, and so, but it was mostly fantasy and fantasy sci-fi-ish, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But not a lot. But this really caught my imagination, and so I had to read like the next one and the next one.
Do you read Philip K. Dick or Ray Bradbury? Or
No, I can't say I have.
those are usually big names on sci-fi and fantasy. Ursula K.
Yeah.
Le Guin. Though, as a reader, I'm also I've been a reader all my life. Maybe reader first before any other type of nerdiness. And um, but I was exposed more to skönlitteratur, to literary genre.
Mm.
And then people exposed to this literary genre tend to be a little bit snob, especially if you found it when you were young. You see,
Yeah.
this is the highest art, blah, blah, blah. Then they tend to,
Yeah.
oh, those are kids stuff with the sci-fi and something like that. But I'm sober now. I'm no longer high and snob.
Yeah.
But making this podcast is also another way for me to try to appreciate what other people read. And then in the process, I discover even more. And then reading is just a pleasure that shouldn't be compartmentalized to stuff like that.
Mm.
Anyway, uh, I want to ask you that. Did you read Harry Potter?
Yes, I did.
Better.
I've read all of the books. So
Yeah.
and in the good old fashioned reading it actually from paper kind of way as well. And it's yeah, that is a good series to see a author's growth in many
Mm,
ways.
mm,
You can tell that she gets more confident and uh, expands her view in many aspects there. So uh, this is sort of a good reflection also on Dan Simmons' books, where he has a very clear idea when he starts out, and this expands quite a lot.
mm.
Um, and it's somewhat restricted by the books being compartmentalized in the two books first, and then the second two books, which matches the format very well based on some of the characters and stuff like that, because
Yeah.
it does reflect on what's written before.
Yes.
And I think Dan Simmons is probably also a now sober literary snob, where he very clearly knows a lot
I
about.
can see that. That's why I like this book. Now I reveal it that I like the book. But before we go on, let's introduce the book after we talk quite a lot now. Since this is the book you love, or maybe started you in the reading journey, your reading journey, please introduce these two books to our audience.
Yeah. Hyperion, the first book, is a very fascinating story device where that plays on the same style as Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, which is,
Story in a story.
yeah, stories in a story. So this is these no, he lived like 600 years ago, right? And still his writing lives on. It's the story of seven pilgrims who are on their way to this, or they're part of a pilgrimage. A very limited amount of people are allowed to do this pilgrimage onto a world called Hyperion. The goal for the different pilgrims is very diverse. But the promise is, or the legend is, that if you go on this pilgrimage, most of the pilgrims will vanish or simply actually be murdered by this avatar creature called the Shrike. And the one that is allowed to complete the pilgrimage, more or less in a almost jinn-like fashion, is allowed to have their wish come true. And they have very different reasons for going on this pilgrimage, but they all feel that it is vital. So they are willing to take this challenge of or possible death in there. The story builds up, so we get to meet the characters. They draw lots. We sort of are presented the world where we are. The universe is in the future, humanity and AI have created this wondrous society where they claim it's wondrous. We spread out. We are everywhere we can. We transform planets. We move everything aside, very colonization style, and we place humanity as humanity is on Earth into these places. So the universe is forced to adapt to humanity, and any planet that does well enough is sort of granted this status of being part of this instant travel system called the Farcasters. Hyperion is not a part of this system. So the pilgrimage takes a lot of time. There is faster than light travel, but there's time debt. So you spend 2 weeks in the ship, and that means that in the real world, about was like 3 years pass by, something like that. So the travel from most planets to Hyperion takes a few weeks for the people on board the ship, but they lose 8 years in time. So they wake up 8 years in the future, so to speak. And that's, all of the laws of physics sort of require this. So that's why it's there. The pilgrims arrive, they draw lots to tell their stories, just like in the Canterbury Tales. The pilgrims are the council, a diplomat. Fedman Kazad, a soldier from Mars, a descendant of Palestinian refugees. He has a very, very fascinating story. There's this private investigator called Braun Lamia. A priest, a Catholic priest called Lenar Hoyt. Pardon?
Sounds German.
Yes, it does have a good German twang to it, doesn't it? There's this scholar called Saul Weintraub.
Yes.
So at this point, we've covered all the 3 Abrahamic religions as well. Very clear choices. Yeah. There's a Templar, not a Christian Templar, but sort of a new age tree-loving Templar called Hetmastin, and a quite close to going mad poet called Martin Silenus, who definitely has a story in all of this. And so this is sort of how the story sort of progresses. We get these stories as they're told. And I believe the first one is the priest. And he introduces the world, more or less, of Hyperion. So we get some insight into how society works. Most religions are near death, you might say. They all survive on different planets. Usually these planets are very simple. Or they're in a situation of poverty or need, which is usually very good places for religions to remain important in people's lives. Outside in this Farcaster world, people don't have time, right? They travel instantly to different places. Some of these super famous and rich people have literal walls of Farcaster portals. So they move from one part of their house to another, and so their kitchen is on one planet where there's a vast agriculture, and then they move on to their patio, which is on a water world, and they sit there and eat. You know, it's you, and they can't tell that they've passed through because it's this just clean transport. It is insane. And then you have this priest who's struggling a bit, I think you could say, and at the same time he's trying to find a friend of his, or somewhat mentorish, called Paul Duray, who's already been on Hyperion. And it's sort of this that story is quite insane. I think we'll skip to the spoiler part before I sort of dig too much into that one. So I'll leave it a be.
Let's agree we spoil it after 30 minutes. So
yeah,
I think
that's a very good idea.
Let's just go to the whole main story of the two books at least.
Yeah. So we get his story. It's very deep, but it sets the world. You get to know sort of what's going on in different places. You get an insight into some things that are going on that remain unexplained throughout the two books, really. There's a race of people that live there that people don't really understand how they came to be. And I guess it's not spoiling to talk about that too much, but I think there's a lot of elements. So I think we could skip to Fedman Kazad, the soldier story.
Yeah.
And he is a very good insight into humanity in this world. He lives, he's a man that grew up on Mars, on a planet that didn't really do the transition into, or sort of the terraforming well.
Was he born in Mars?
On Mars, yes, on the planet Mars, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. And, a Palestinian refugee descendant.
Yeah.
So he definitely has sort of statements that make it clear that he deep down has a fundament or a sort of baseline of being Muslim, really, but it's not what drives him, right? It's not part of him. He is a soldier primarily, but in times of need or in times of distress, he clearly finds a good solace and purpose in a sort of a baseline religiosity. And he has thorough training, this VR training, where he meets the love of his life. And then she shows up in VR. They have an experience together, and then she vanishes. And then he can't find her. And he's like, am I going mad? Who is this person? And then after a while, she gives her name, which is Moneta. Moneta is a reference to two different goddesses in the old mythologies, but in Greek mythology, she is the goddess of memory. And so a very good name for somebody who lives in his memory. He becomes a very good soldier at the end. He is one of the names where it's hard to know if Dan Simmons is actually referencing somebody else I know there is somebody, a warrior scholar called Al-Kazab, and I believe that translates to the butcher or a butcher. And Kasad is also known as the butcher due to one of the battles that he was in. So that's sort of one of the very, very many instances of where Dan Simmons sort of plays on these things. Moneta, Kazad. So yeah. He has a very good insight into humanity, and he shows that Dan Simmons does this. His story is equally intense as Lenar Hoyt's, but in a very different way. We sort of move on to this private investigator, Braun Lamia. She is not on a pilgrimage for herself. She is there because one of her former clients was supposed to be on the pilgrimage. And she's sort of in his place.
When I read this story about Braun Lamia, you remember there is a character in Game of Thrones, woman, warrior. I forgot the name.
Yeah.
That's what I think the time I read that.
Yeah, she has the big blonde one. I can't remember.
Yes.
Yeah. She is a Lucian, so she's born on a planet with higher gravity, which means that she has a baseline strength higher than most humans. She's a bit shorter, but and through her we get a very good view of the worlds that encompasses this new hegemony of man, as it's called, right? The Farcaster network-based society that humanity has. She will be traveling quite a few planets, but she also has a love story in it, just like Kasad, but it is a very different kind of love story. And it's very poetic. It clearly bases itself on the poetry of John Keats, who is a person we will probably be talking a lot more about as we come through here. Keats being this man that was born at the end of the 1700s, died early 1800s from tuberculosis at 25, I believe. Wrote these wonderful poems that really captures this sort of, I wouldn't say young love, but it is certainly sort of the young adulthood kind of emotional,
was he
highly emotional love? But yeah,
was he part of the romanticism period? I think there is a period.
I think he's second generation romantics or whatever it's called. Yeah.
Yes.
So very much sort of the one that puts the foundation for what we in Norway also call sort of nasjonalromantikken, which sounds really bad when you translate it, but as you know, Norway has a very special kind of national romance. It's not very nationalistic. It's just very young country sort of thing. And yeah, it's sort of the one that lays the foundation for that, which is sort of where we get Ibsen and stuff like that. So he has Keats and Braun Lamia fall in love, and her goal is to find out who kills him at one point, which is a very deep story in itself. I think I'm going to say that a lot, because Dan
I
Simmons
will,
does this.
I will chip into. Don't worry.
Yeah. Um, as this progresses, as these stories are told, we're sort of moved from different places inside the world of Hyperion. So they go from getting off the spacecraft to boarding this ship that is more like a steamer, old-fashioned river steamer with like the wheels on the side,
Oh,
kind
I
of
didn't
thing.
get that. Damn it.
And sort of traveling not just this sea, but this sea of grass, these incredibly high grass straws that are sort of native to the planet, and they sort of yeah. So a big part happens there. There's nobody really else because that's when we're told that the planet of Hyperion is going to be attacked. And we get this, we've already been told in the Khazad story about how humanity sort of left Earth and they split off into these sort of ousters, which are a bit. I don't know if they're supposed to sort of be like a spin-off hippie kind of thing, but they're sort of live with nature and adapt to where you're going. And they do DNA manipulations to
Are
sort
they
of
human?
adapt to space. And
Are they
yes,
human?
they're very much human.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're humans that are adapted to a different environment, right?
Mm.
In different ways, but they remain genetically human. And in the later books, where we are told that they're still the same species. So
Yeah.
you could they can have children with the normal human and
Normal
so on.
with the looping.
Yeah, but so these pilgrims are the last ones. They're sort of allowed to do this final pilgrimage. And that is sort of because the planet will be attacked. And it's going to be attacked because the ousters want control over the place they're going to, which is known as the time tombs.
Mm.
And these time tombs are creations in the future moving backwards in time, right? And that is sort of the home of the Shrike. That they constrain the Shrike to this place, and the Shrike is this bladed avatar thing. It's
3 meters
it's
high,
madness.
3 meters
Yes,
high, full of blade and 4 arms. Is it?
4 arms. Yeah, exactly. And a Shrike is a bird that picks up other creatures and uses the thorns of trees to impale them. So they impale them there, leave them, and then come back when they're dead. That is what this bird does. And that is where sort of the Shrike gets its name.
Oh,
And so this place is clearly sort of a destination for the ousters, and they we don't really know why, but they want control of it. Right? And the AIs that support humanity are very uncertain about the time tombs. Every time Hyperion, the planet, goes into their calculations, everything becomes uncertain. So we're sort of given this introduction very much at this point. The story expands, and we're told more about what is going on in the world. Until and that sort of is a setup because we need that information when the scholar Saul Weintraub's story comes in. Saul is a scholar of, I believe, among other things, religion, but he is sort of he lives on this planet which is majority, if not fully colonized by descendants of what seems to be primarily what's known as Ashkenazi Jewish people. They have sort of a planet of vast agriculture, so sort of the plains of America kind of thing, but on a planet scale, dotted with towns of universities. So this is very lonely, far between other places kind of thing. And then you have some of the best universities in the hegemony of man are also placed there. So
I detect some sort of stereotypes as well in that.
there might be. There is certainly a feel of that at times. But so Saul has a very straightforward life. He loves his work as a scholar. He has a wife and a daughter. The daughter grows up to become what they call an archaeologist, but it seems to be a bit physicist as well, because she's an archaeologist that specializes in these time tombs and the physics of what's going on there. So it's sort of they say archaeologist, and that is a archaeological expedition that she goes on at the age of sort of 25, I believe she's about. She goes to Hyperion, meets what will be the love of her life at that point, and has a accident where suddenly she starts growing backwards in time. Mm-hmm. So when she wakes up every morning, she's forgotten what's happened the day before, and she believes it is that day. Mm-hmm. And this goes on backwards all the way. So she comes home, and these two parents are suddenly in the position where they are in their 50s and or late 40s, and they have a child that is at the moment independent, but is ill, right? And they take care of Rachel, as her name is, but you know, as time moves backwards, she has this every morning she wakes up and she has this sort of calm log, I imagine like an iPad, where she has a recording of herself where she explains herself, her situation to herself. And at one point she just decides, I think that even though she can't remember viewing these every morning, every day, I think her body kind of remembers. She grows very tired of this, because every day that sort of she will break down, as you would, because you're exposed to this tragedy of yourself every single day. And so she stops, and they just start pretending that everything is okay. So she wakes up like the day after her birthday, and they have to plan ahead, and they have to remember, what did she get for her birthday when she was 15 or when she was 10, right? Mm-hmm. And they have to explain all of these things. But as she grows younger and she becomes a child, children are very accepting of how things are. So even if her parents are looking very old, she adapts. But her friends are gone. Everyone is gone, right?
Yeah.
And then there's an accident, and the mother passes away, and Saul and Rachel are just there. And you know, he has to find a way every morning to sufficiently explain why mom isn't home, what's going on, why she can't go to school, why she can't visit her friends, every single day until we come to the point where he is on the pilgrimage, because he is given a vision that he needs to go on that pilgrimage. And I think we can come back to that one, but
so we are now in the fourth story in the first. Yeah. So there are seven pilgrims, and then we have covered the fourth story out of them, because in the beginning they drew a lottery, because they who has to tell their stories first. But as you said, this is a very smart way. This is a story device, actually, how you introduce the word through another story, instead of you just plainly saying Hyperion is blah 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 like a Wikipedia. That is one of the clever thing I see. I got hooked right away after the first story by Leonard White, the priest. And then so Bronlemia and then so Weintraub. At the end of book one, we get another story, I guess, by the council, isn't it?
Yes. So the council is the last one. After Sol, it's supposed to be Hetmastine, the Templar.
Missing somehow.
Yes, he goes missing on this boat in the Sea of Grass. So just to mention that, so Sol is on the boat with Rachel as a baby. So he's probably at this point in his 70s. She has grown up to 25, and then now she's grown all the way back again, with all of the burdens and stuff that must have been for him in this situation. She's now just days old, really. So then we're supposed to hear the story of the Templar true voice of the tree. That is the ship they came on. It's a tree wrapped in a cocoon of sort of magnetic sort of stuff. I don't know what it is they call it, but it's this creature called an erg that is able to make sort of a shield around it and keep it keep it whole, more or less, as well as sort of propel it through space. So there's this tree from a planet, kind of redwood-ish in size, I would say, but it's not a redwood. And he is the captain, and therefore he is the true voice of the tree, which is a fascinating detail there. So we sort of skip him, and I believe the second to last is the poet, Martin Silenus.
Of course, the poet first.
Yeah. And Martin Silenus is born on Earth, and at this point is a couple of I guess he's in 500-600 years old by sort of time that has passed. The Earth is lost. So in the creation of the Farcasters, the AIs made a mistake and created humans AIs made a mistake and created a tiny micro black hole inside of the center of the Earth, which tore the Earth apart. This is the Earth that Martin is born on, into a very privileged family. They have access to, as you probably would at this time, crafts, so they can just travel anywhere by these electromagnetic propelled ships, or crafts, supercars, I don't know, flying cars. So they have a vacation home on the plains of America, and they spend time here and they spend time on the moon. And he lives a very privileged life. But when the Earth is destroyed, the family is in debt, very much in debt, and his mother puts him on a travel to a colony world where he's given the really third class travel accommodations. So he wakes up with literal frost damage in his brain and can barely talk, and is set to work off the debt in these mines. And as he comes through this and he regains his mind, he realizes that he's a poet. So he starts creating poetry at this point. And the poetry seems then to be connected to what's going on and what's going to happen. So he finds that there is a correlation with events, with what he is actually coming up with. And he comes to a point where he gets to travel to Hyperion. There's this king who has moved to Hyperion to have his kingdom there instead. And Martin Silenus becomes his sort of court poet.
Yeah.
He even changes his physical appearance so that he'll look a bit more like these archetypes from Greek mythology. We have like the horns, and I can't remember what they're called off the top of my head, but he sort of is the in-house sort of poet for this mad king called William, so Mad King Billy. And it's sort of he starts to then think that he needs to write these poems that are called the Hyperion cantos, named after the Keats poems, the unfinished Keats poems, and that his muse is the Shrike. So that is where this is coming from, and he goes somewhat mad with this, but there is correlation, and he is he continuously has this treatment called Poulsen treatments, which is one of the things that Saul Weintraub has, a singular Poulsen treatment to sort of help him stay alive and younger for his daughter. Martin Silenus has, at this point, probably had hundreds. He has, there is a collapse of this kingdom of King Billy, and Martin becomes this super famous poet in the hegemony of man, who is how we know that they create these elaborate houses where farcasters sort of connect different planets, and you can have your home on different planets and in vast sort of differences from room to room, because he has one of these, and he becomes this super ultra rich guy.
Alexander, let's go through the whole main story first, and then we can deep dive to the details, because I want to say a lot too there.
yeah. So and he sort of, but he loses himself in this. He can't stay rich. He needs to complete his poems, and that is why he is on the pilgrimage, because he needs to get there, and he needs to meet his muse, right? And then the council is a very big contrast, but his story is very spoilerish, I would say. But he is also very secretive. So
and the whole story starts with him, actually. The time he got contacted by the CEO of the hegemony, Mina
Yeah.
Gladstone. It's a very caricaturist character, I mean. And then he was informed that he will be one of the seven pilgrims in the pilgrimage to Hyperion. And then he was warned that one of them are a traitor. And then we found out later who the traitor was. But if you see this first scene, it will be. I see the humor of it.
Yeah. And I think he is a sort of a story that, yeah, he does tell a story, a very lovely story from his grandparents,
Mm.
which is very unique because it plays on this somebody going to a planet, falling in love, and then they have to leave again, but there is no Farcaster because they are building the sort of the main Farcaster on this planet. So when he leaves, one of them leaves and they come back, they have this time debt, right? So they leave to get more of the stuff that is required to build, and they come back, and the person that one of the characters has fallen in love with the other one, she's grown older, right? And then this sort of happens in steps. But I think the series tale, as it's called, is probably one that is best told in the spoiler version, so to speak.
We
But yeah,
we can
they
do
come
that.
to yeah. So I'll leave you to your thoughts there, but we come to a sort of a pause in the story when it transitions from the first to the second book,
Yeah.
and that is when they disembark and they start sort of coming towards the time tombs and all
Th-
of this. That is sort of where the first book ends. So we get told these stories,
that's the
and
actual,
then
isn't it? If I understand it correctly, the actual pilgrim, and then the whole political stuff and the warfare happens in the second book. And if
yeah,
you the first book is actually a very long preparation to settle you up, to introduce you to the whole world, and then the
yeah,
actual uh, actions happen in book two. But to tell you the
yes,
truth, as a reader, I enjoy the first book more because uh, the craftiness of a writer, it's really shown in the first book. But
mm,
to to I always make this conversation personal because that's my intention. If you want to Google about this book, then you can just read it on Google, but it's more interesting to how we take it personally.
mm.
That makes the value of this conversation, I guess. So, John Keats, when I was in my snob period, I have long list of big names in literature that, okay, one day I have to read. For example, Kafka, Tolstoy, all those names. Maybe you know, not the Kafka that we work in the project.
Not
Yeah,
the good Kafka, not the other one. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Albert Camus, all these names, and John Kidd is one of them. At the time, I thought I would read poetry, but after I reached this age now, I think the kind of books I have read least is poetry. Do you read poetry? Uh, Alexander?
See, I do, but I find that poetry and I'd say dance, especially modern
John
dancing,
Donne?
have something in common where I enjoy it watching or reading, but I'm not sure I quite get it. Right? There is, I love the art of it. I
Yeah,
love when I get it. I certainly see why it's such an appealing thing.
yes,
And Keats is a very good example of poetry that he writes in a very old timey English way, right? He is this is he lived right before the Victorian age,
yeah.
so it's sort of the end of this very unique time period, and I think it's a very special way of writing that he has, and is very artsy. Maybe one can even say a bit snobbish, but it is also
that's my take.
very, but it's extremely lovely poetry because it's so emotional. You actually need to know that a lot of these are written to this one woman that he loves, that he is sort of disconnected from when he's quite literally dying in Rome. And he's had this dream of a life with this woman, young woman, called Fanny Braun.
Yeah. The name is so contemporary, funny.
Yeah, and it's just when you see it as that, and you see sort of how much he longs for the life that he is losing as he is writing it, he is very much a favorite of mine. Whatever I read, it's compared to him, especially in that sort of dimension. But yeah, he is a born in 1795 and died in 1821. It's such a short life, and he knows that it's coming to an end when a lot of the poems are written. Yeah.
So I guess going back to my experience with this book is that, wow, what a waste of being snob, because I haven't even read John Keats, and I sort of regret it because Dan Simmons showed how much he knows, or maybe he's a scholar of John Keats, and then how creatively he built a story out of his knowledge of romantic poems, or what is the name?
Yeah, the poetry of it all, but also he clearly knows what happened in the real world, because he uses real people's name,
Yes,
or names, and they are connected in the story very much in a similar way to how they are connected to Keats and
even the word Hyperion is from Keats. That's what I think, because for me, when I see Hyperion, and then my snob brain is saying, this is just a sci-fi, another Eon, Decepticon, Transformers stuff. No, this is John Keats from 700, who wrote that, who has that name. And
yeah. He has an unfinished series of poems that I think were like 1820 or something like that when he gave up. I could be very wrong. Called Hyperion cantos. He reflects Martin Silenus in that way, that he has this large epic story he wants to tell, and he's unable to do it, and he struggles with that. The real John Keats really struggled with his inability to complete this masterwork of his, and at the same time that he is creating a masterwork, but it's not recognized in his lifetime, because it's written in letters and documented by other people, then really isn't acknowledged until his death. But yeah,
sometimes you think about those big names in the classic. Are they really big because people, does the bigness, the greatness reflect readership, or other ways? I suspect it's more the other way, when your name got into a university, and then there is a whole study, a whole department dedicated to read yours, then you will become big. It's not necessary that you get viral in our sense, modern sense, that everybody, or the wide public, is consuming your work. But anyway, that's the way it is at that time. And the point I'm trying to get, I'm a bit lost now, but reading this book it has evolved, especially in those stories inside the story. You get a different atmosphere when you are in the Leonard Hoyt. I was thinking like the evangelical priests going to the colonies and then meeting the
Mm.
tribal people there and then trying to convert them, and then they got another accident. He got, yeah, the Bikura people is the first aha moment, or the first hook of this book, I think, when yeah, with the experience of the Bikura. And that, but
Yeah.
what I was trying to say now, I remember. I need to read this book again because there are so many things that I don't feel I get the whole thing, because you are almost bombarded with details, and then you have to,
Mm.
because your bandwidth or your fat line is not that fat or it's not that uh, wide, and then you
Yeah.
have to pick and choose which one you focus first. And then at this first reading, I want to get the whole feeling of the stories, but I stopped you when you started mentioning details because I want to be in that place. There are many details I want to have there. Like
Yes.
the forecast. I don't need cars. I can just forecast. And then I think he is also clever in using the terms. I don't know. Maybe it sounds even more clever when we see it today, because we have the term bandwidth, we have the term podcast, but he created the term forecast, comlog, the void that bind. That is so poetic, isn't it? Is
The
it?
void that binds is beautiful.
Yeah,
It's
it's so beautiful, but it's the forecasting technology.
in the first books, the fat line on the Farcaster is the void that binds. In the two first books, but
Oh,
what's
there is more?
really incredible about what you say there is sort of because in these details. So you when you complete the first book, but especially when you've completed the two first books, right? You see these, and we live in an age where getting the information about and finding the connections that Dan Simmons is making is much easier, right? If we want to look up something about John Keats and his life, it's all there on the internet. When this was written in the end of the 80s, that was a trip to the library. Or if you had the correct books on your shelves, maybe you could look it up there, right?
Yeah.
But sort of not even all encyclopedias would be able to give you that, and we can much easier find these connections, like Maynard Gladstone, who is the CEO, and then there is a prime minister of the United Kingdom called William Gladstone, who is also connected to another character in book two, who is connected to Keats, who is
Yeah.
so, these exist so clearly, and it's there it's on so many levels. He's telling us something, not just on just a simple uh, connection between one or two things, but there is a reflection of what has happened in real life that is part of the understanding of the message there. And when you say that you need to read it again, wait until you've read book 3 and 4, and then you have to go back again,
Yeah.
because there is so much more to add to all of this. Because this is a setup. The first book is a really good setup for the second book, and the two first books are really good setups for the third and fourth book. And
Mm.
just in the same way that the first and second book deviate in what they're trying to tell you, the third and fourth book do exactly the same towards the first and second book, but also the third towards the fourth book.
Mm.
And this is the incredible genius of Dan Simmons, I think.
I
But
totally.
I love that you've fallen right into the same trap I think so many of us have, which is sort of the vast intellectual connections that are there, that you can either read this as a very simple, straightforward story, or
Nothing,
you can.
nothing straightforward and simple about this book.
No, but yeah, that's sort of the thing. You sort of notice that it isn't very straightforward, but it does have a very nice storytelling device in it that makes it enjoyable if you don't understand all of these other things.
Oh, that's a good point.
And
That's a very good point. Go on, go on.
yeah, and but then there is sort of this next level, and I'm pretty sure that we are sitting sort of on the next level, and then there are people out there that see a third level that we haven't even noticed, right? There's guaranteed to be something more in there, I think, because it's sort of there are so many. You scratch the surface and something new shows up again and again.
After reading so many books now, and after talking about it for about 4 years plus now, I think good books is that books that can reflect on you because you have accumulated all this knowledge and all these references, and then if you see it, then it is like, oh, this is what you know. Like I said about the story of Saul Weintraub, I know that there are stereotypes there because of my accumulated uh, knowledge about it. And then as
Yep.
well as you get the references of Riyadh, oh, that's referring to the Arab Saudi capital, and
Mm.
all this thing because you know it. And then talking with other people with different accumulated knowledge will be interesting exactly because of that. What you pick it up and what other pick it up might be complementary, might be slightly different, and something like that.
Yeah, certainly. And I think, I mean, the Jews are an intellectual people, sort of
Right in my
clear
face.
thing there. It's sort of, I mean, that is one of the few where he sort of plays on stereotypes. I don't find, well, I find, so there's two priests of, so the Christians are sort of divided into two categories, I'd say, in this one. Paul Duray, who is a Teilhard sort of follower, and Teilhard is uh, is brought up, but he is a he had a very special kind of Christianity or religiosity with him. He saw the universe as something growing, and I think what he said that was that God is the power behind the growth. So everything that grows from the power of God, but the end final product at the what he called omega point is where you find God. God is the creation of his own creation, looping back, sort of thing. So by understanding nature, by understanding science, you are understanding the creation, but also where the creation is going and where it's going towards. And Paul Duray is very much in that sort of category. And I think the Christian ones are the most that are, we get exposed to the religiosity a lot more. Kassad is only clearly religious in times of need or distress or when he's trying to figure something out. I think that's probably based on Simmons's lack of knowledge of Muslims and Islam in itself. But he does have clear references, as you say, right? And I
Yeah.
think he has done research towards that, but I'm not in a position. Maybe if you found something there.
I found one,
But
but mostly it's more like an Arabic references, like the Hijra. It's
okay, yeah.
it's referring to the movement of the Muslims from Mecca to Medina, where they start the year of the Muslim year start that time of the Hijra. But the
Okay, there you go.
Hijra here, it's sort of, I don't know what that is, but there is always a reference of before and after the Hijra, right? It's just exactly that.
Yes.
because
Yeah.
if you see the periodization of Muslim history, what happened in the Mecca, what verses of Quran that was revealed in Mecca is kind of different with the one in Medina after the Hijrah. So
Mm.
that's again, you said that this is straightforward. Nothing straightforward about this. Straightforward in the sense that if you want to have a comfort of knowing everything along the way, you're not, because
Yeah.
you have to be comfortable not knowing things, and then okay, let go. I don't want to go there now. I don't know what Comlock is. Go on, let's go on. Let's accept that Comlock is a Comlock, and then you. This is another enjoyment that I get. You deduce what it is by the way it is being used in the sentences or in the context. That's I love doing that. That's
Yeah.
one of the enjoyment of reading this book.
Yeah. I love that. So you have the Hejira, pre-Hejira, hegemonies, phases. With what you just told me, I actually make some connections as well. So
Okay.
maybe it has more knowledge, but it just not on a religiosity, but on the history part
Okay.
and these references. And I love that. It is these things that sort of you build up upon it, and then yeah, the soul story sort of has a very clear reference. But yeah, it's
I
I
was
think
thinking of no, sorry.
yeah, no, just completing on that, the story is straightforward in ignorance. If you're ignorant to a lot of things, it's still a good story because you're just reading a story that's going from here to there. But the more you're able to do these connections, the deeper the picture becomes.
You know,
So yeah.
going back to another discussion, I like having side stories, side track. One of the snob things that I checked out was War and Peace.
Hmm.
If I would, before I read War and Peace, I thought the most interesting part was the war, but actually not. I actually enjoy more of the stories when it is in peace. So, uh, exactly the same with this book, maybe. I enjoy more when there are no political stuff like in the second book, when the Mina Gladstone sitting with the in the war room, what should we do next? And then this I don't enjoy so much. I can just okay, I don't need to focus so hard on it. But when they're in the tomb, when they're in the tree, where all these
Yeah.
details, then I stop more to try to absorb as much detail as I get. Even I cannot picture what a shriek is. I was since because of there are a lot of reference in the desert, the Arabic, the pyramid. The word shriek in my mind always often replaced by the word sheik, the Arabic sheik.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Well, I
totally
would certainly say I
totally
think that's two
different.
very different paths. Yeah. Most definitely. Yeah. I mean the uh yeah.
You don't
With
have
the
to
Arab
comment on that.
and no, no, I do because the like Kazad as a person and as a character is very much the most honorable. He is he is very honest. He's
He's the
very
hero.
straightforward.
He's the
He
hero
doesn't yeah
archetype. Yeah.
he's so there is a suspected traitor. He makes no signs that I would say that would make anybody suspect him of being that. And if he is, everybody's doomed anyways. So, but he is very straightforward in that manner. He is an honorable man. He makes promises. He puts his own life secondary to the rescue of others. He runs into dangerous situations to protect any of the other characters whenever it is called for. So, yes, the warrior is is the person of Palestinian descent, but he is a true warrior scholar for certain, and he is most definitely the most honorable of all of them. So I'd if I was a Muslim, I wouldn't be offended by that character. But then again, I'm not really offended as a Christian of the two priests, and they're very special,
I
and they're anything but.
I think if you
So
can be offensive by reading this book, you really want to be offended. Anyway,
yeah,
you don't read it in the first place. But my point was, since you are talking about Cassatt, let's go deep into the details about his experience. I love the idea of this virtual reality where you train as a soldier. You want to be trained in the was it the French warfare or
I
something?
think it was more or less any warfare. So
So
they
he
sort
can
of
go back as
start,
much as yeah.
yeah, they start as soldiers on the battlefield, more or less like straight into like the 1100s something as a longbowman,
Yeah.
Englishmen fighting the French, and they sort of train not just for use of weaponry, but for
Yeah.
warfare and
Real
being a soldier.
situation where you can actually
Yeah,
die. That
yeah.
is a dream.
Yeah, it is a the virtual reality aspect of it is clearly very deep, and we see people get addicted to it in other aspects.
Yeah.
So the yeah, shunting in as they call it, there are people that live in these virtual dimensions. But yeah,
And then
um,
the thing I enjoy most was the first love making by with Moneta, where you actually he was about to be killed, and then this description was so beautiful that I read the paragraph so many times because it's so effective. If you I read a lot of books writers talking about books, and then they said sex scenes are not easy. You can end up being very cheesy very soon, and then cheapen the whole work
yep,
because of vulgarity. But sometimes if you being too spared, it's not fun at all. But this is
yep.
you have to find the balance, and then by contracting it at they're actually doing it on top of dead people in the war zones. That damn.
They're yeah, they're very clearly two soldiers that don't see death really in the same way anymore. They've become very blasé about the whole thing, which probably is a lot of the point. I think that tells us a lot about Moneta and Kazad as soldiers.
Do you happen to have
As
read Musashi?
pardon?
Have you read
No.
Musashi, by the way? No. If I remember correctly, I'm going to make an episode of it. I'm going to read it. There is the battle scene of that. The Japanese has thought about it. Don't worry. This
Exactly
is
right.
not new.
Yeah, yeah. No, but I think that is sort of, and now we're sort of touching into where I think the spoiler part because
We are
it's
spoiling already. Don't stop yourself.
yeah. Well, at this point, there's sort of no bars held. The the world building in book one, right, and the continuation and the conclusions that you find in book two are extreme in that you believe you've read the whole story when you have Lenar Hoyt going to a planet where there's these Bikura that are very dim-witted, but clearly humans with a um, very altered, simplified language. And they bear a cross on their chest, right? And this cross is a sort of incredible story device that will return later, but is forced upon both of the priests. Both of them are forced into wearing this cross, and they learn that death doesn't happen anymore when you're wearing it, which is a clear reflection of something else, but you're not reborn fully as yourself anymore. Every time you die and you're reborn, you become a bit more dim-witted. And then you end up as these sexless creatures that, you know, society doesn't die anymore, so nobody needs to procreate, but, you know, words are simplified, actions are simplified, death doesn't mean anything. And I think that tears at their religiosity. It removes what for these priests is sort of the ultimate reward for a good life, which is going to heaven and all of that. And they're just stuck in this loop. And at the same time, you have all of these others that are fearing their own death or the death of their loved ones or have experienced death. And they're denied this cruciform because, you know, the Bikura are destroyed, right? Yeah. As a revenge. And it sort of also builds up to this Sol Weintraub story of a man that is given a vision to go to a planet and literally sacrifice his child. And he believes that he's going mad. That he is just imagining that he is a new Abraham who is told by God to sacrifice his son as a sort of a test. And that he needs to go there to sacrifice his daughter. And he believes that he's mad until he learns that his wife is having the same sort of visions, but different. They're not the same, right? And then he realizes that, okay, he needs to go there. And then the voice goes from being the voice of God to being the voice of Rachel. And please take me there. Please do this. And he's like, well, nothing is helping. There is no way to save his daughter. And he has these maddening visions of her asking him to bring her back to the place where this all started, this backwards travel. And the hurt of that and his travel into going hyper religious and then falling out of his religiosity out of despair, because why would God do this to me and to my daughter? And why do innocent people suffer? Which, I mean, classic things that we all sort of have to accept in religiosity. Why, if God is good, does bad things happen, right? And then later you find out that the council is who is the traitor by all measures, is the one that made all of this probably happen because he ruined the sort of time sphere bubble thing that exists there. He broke the bonds of the Shrike. He broke so everything that was restricted in the time tombs is now released. And that's probably when she was in the one of the time tombs and is exposed to these waves and start growing backwards instead, right? And these interconnections and the painful stories that exist there just grow and grow and grow in the second book, because you get set up for these stories. And I think that's why we end on the council story, where you learn of these people that are coming to literally colonize a water world. They're building the Farcasters because that makes it a full colony. That is sort of it. And the people that live there don't really want it. And they acknowledge that they will lose their society. I look at it almost as a like the Hawaiian Polynesian
Yeah.
sort of thing, right?
Maui something.
Yeah, the Maui, and it's that's how I sort of see those people that live on this planet, and they come to build the main Farcaster hub up in space. This one of the builders falls in love with a local girl. They literally go on a magic carpet ride. Speaking of old Arab tales, and
it's called Hawking carpet.
Yes.
For some reason.
Who knows why? And his friend is killed by the locals because they want to stop the creation of these, or they hate them because they know what is coming. But at the same time, they can't resist them because that means war and death. And he he goes away and he comes back, and Siri has grown older, and at one point she bears him a son. And even the son will, when he comes back, and he's still young, but his son is middle-aged, right? Because that's how long it takes just to move all of these things.
Yeah, I mean,
and to get the construction.
I mean, Soul Weintraub is the most tragic, I guess. You have to take care of babies 3 times, because the first one, and then the second one when she got sick, and then when she got back as an infant as well, and then she will have another 10 years or more to take care of a small kid.
Exactly. And then you have the council's family, where the father doesn't even experience his son's life, and that son is, of course, the council's father again. And they have this civil war where they rebel against the hegemony man, and they try to fight them, Siri being a lead character in this, and they become legendary, but nobody knows that. And then the council and his father become senators in the hegemony of man. So they're really already at that point traitors to the cause, I guess. But the council wants to fight back as well. And when he gets the chance and he meets the ousters, he's given them opportunity to so-called open the time tombs, which he does. But he does it by also betraying the ousters. So he betrays everyone.
Double agent,
but he's on all levels. He has his own agenda. He wants to basically punish the hegemony of man for what they did to his planet. That is how I see it. And he doesn't care that he must betray the ousters as well to get his to get there.
To be honest, as a reader, I found the council story is the least interesting, because I've seen it so many times. Like in War and Peace, there is somebody who actually start the war, and then maybe in the Lords of the Ring, there are people who actually throw the ring and then makes all this orc and whatever. And then there are some tedious moments that I can relate to the tedious moment when Frodo was carrying the ring all the way, all the suffering. There are parts of it that I try to skip as much as fast as possible, because I try to find, my first time reading probably is to find the small gems. You just mentioned one, like the Soul Weintraub story. He is a scholar. He wrote a book about the Abraham dilemma. And then, of course, you said mention the classical problem with religiosity. If God is so good, why there are so many suffering? And then why? What is the logical way of suffering? If in Indonesia, people often mention that life is an examination, life an exam. You will
Mm,
pass, and then or you will fail. The,
mm,
the one who pass will go to heaven. The one who doesn't pass will go to hell. But
mm.
if you go to school, this is my thoughts to read all the to understand the analogy. You actually consented that I want to be admitted to the school, but
Yeah.
the consent part is often forgotten in this examination of life because you were created as a student and then you get
Yeah.
this examination and then you get to hell if you don't. What kind of a sick school or sick minister of education who created the whole scheme if you think about it, right? But
Yeah.
this is not, there are no answer to this dilemma, but to the specific story of Sul Weintraub, I said it in a Norwegian way, Sul. Actually, I expected Saul, soul.
Yeah.
But the thing that I like the most with his story was at the end, is Abraham being tested, or is Abraham actually tested God by
Yes.
doing that? That is a beautiful way of sort of find a resolution of unresolved eternal question.
Exactly. And it also becomes sort of a um if God then promises grace and God promises everything to be fixed, will you still trust on this? Right? He shows up there and he still hands off his child
Yeah.
based on trust. Wow. He recognizes who he's passing the child on to, but there is a different uh, element there, and this is where the Keats character sort of also enters as a hero, right? Where you have John Keats, the client of Braun Lamia, who comes to Braun because he has been killed, and he is a hybrid, so he's a human by he has a human body, but his human body is just a device for an AI that lives in the techno core, as it's known.
He reminds me of in We Are Bob. He's a replicant, isn't he?
Yes,
Kind of.
yeah. In many ways, you can say that he is. He when he's disconnected from, so he lives in this hybrid body, and when he lives there, he is sort of, that is his existence, but he can leave and bring his consciousness, if you will, with him. But he is restricted in many ways as a hybrid, and he is killed, and he wakes up again, not in the same body, but he's reawakened, and he finds Braun Lamia and asks her to figure out why he was killed and who killed him. And what we learn is that his persona is a sort of a creation of what they believed John Keats was like, the AIs. So they tried creating his mind uh, and then using his DNA to create his physical body. And this is supposed to give them a connection to humanity. But we also then get an insight into the AI world. And the AIs are not as good as one would like to think. They are very much using humanity for their own goals.
Okay, you mean good in terms of intention, right? Not good in terms
Yes,
of sophistication of the technology. It's really
yes,
sophisticated.
as in their intentions are good.
Yes,
They
yes.
are not, and they they give a story of how the AI world is created, and we get insight into this at the same time as we get this love story between Ron Lamia and John Keats as well. and we sort of are introduced to Keats as a dual person in there. And then in the third book, he identifies himself as John Severn.
It's the second book. It's
And
the second book.
in the second book, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
He in his third or fourth iteration or life, he is identified as John Severn. John Severn being the man who stayed at the real John Keats's side when he died. So he took care of Keats as he was dying. He also is the connection between Keats and Gladstone in the real world. He was a friend of the Prime Minister who was much later in life. John Severn writes with Gladstone, the Prime Minister. And
The CEO.
also there is, pardon?
The CEO.
Yeah, no, well, yes, because that is sort of the thing. So John Severn in the book is serving CEO Gladstone as a connection, but in reality, there is a John Severn, or Joseph Severn, sorry, Joseph Severn that lived and was with John Keats when he died.
The William
and later in life is the friend of the Prime Minister Gladstone in the United Kingdom.
I see, I see.
And then there's Lee Hunt, which is another connection with in all of this. And these are the human beings that exist in real life, but still have their name referenced in the books, right? And they exist in a somewhat parallel world. And it's sort of the past joined together, brought into the future, and retold in many ways. So yeah, it's incredibly fascinating when you move on to the second book. I fully agree. The politics of it is not that fascinating in its own way. It gets a lot more valuable in the third book because it helps set up what happens in the
it has
next.
to be done. It has to be done. There has to be a story connecting all those. But yeah, I read a book one day when I was a student. There is a big book, 7 Archetype of Stories. So stories is not more than a 7 archetypes, and it's a combination of those. One of the archetypes is rag to riches, like Cinderella story or heroic story, Odyssey. But you put all those elements in the levels of the stories. So yeah, sorry,
yeah, no, it is. And again, we do see all of these, how Dan Simmons is a scholar of literature and poetry in many ways.
Yeah.
And he builds this into the story. And that is sort of a divergent side note here is that the rights to create a TV series for this show has been owned by quite a lot of people. And it is now actually on the 3rd of March this year, it was announced that on July 1st, recording will be started.
Oh,
but it's not fully announced, but it's sort of in the paperwork of Hollywood. You can find it on the internet. And this is only there because the casting director has to announce it. So when they do casting, they need to proclaim it. And it's sort of, I fear that there will be a TV show that won't be able to tell this story in the way that it's supposed to be told, because there is so many levels to it.
Yes.
And you sort of have to see it multiple times or read it multiple times. So that it'll be fascinating.
The form is as important for me. The form is as important as the content. And the form is the most difficult one to visualize because you need to do your work to visualize this. If you suddenly being presented by what the Shrike look like, then you're stuck with it. But here is that, there's a creature with blades on it. and then where do you put it? And it depends on how bizarre your mind can think, and that's part of the fun.
Yeah, and the striking itself is fascinating because what does he do? He grabs people, moves them out of time, and literally puts them on a tree of thorns, right? And that's where we find Martin Silenus at one point on this tree, just in pain. And we learn through Uman, which is the AI that created the Keats persona, who has a wonderful way of talking, who's these riddles that are not supposed to be solved. You're sort of just supposed to know, you need to know the answer. He's just telling you, well, you know it, this is why. And then he just confirms more or less with these incredible way of speaking that yeah, you sent me a picture the other day here where you you sort of seem to have stumbled onto the Uman gold.
I combine this reading the paper book as well as the audiobook. And then I imagine I couldn't just go the audiobook before I ever look at the text, because some of the text, especially the dialogue with Uman, you have to see it because the form
Yes.
is different. If you just listen to it, it doesn't make much sense, or you lose a lot of details in it. And then there is a reader-like, sometimes Yoda-like, but sometimes there are so much humor there that,
Yeah.
or the whole book actually, not just Uman's. I think those will be lost in the series because, for example, the blatant references to the Easter when the Leonard Hoyt was dead. Let's wait for him for another 3 days or something.
Yeah, he shows up after 2 days, right? It's
Oh,
sort of, yeah. And exactly, and that's a very good point. In the book, when John Keats brings Bron Lemia into a version of the Technocore, and
mm,
they are exposed to Uman, the way the font is different, the way the text is shown is so different that you very clearly see these are not the same.
yeah,
One is almost like a terminal window
yeah.
output. You're talking to a computer screen more or less, and you see this system font terminal window sort of text,
Yes.
not scroll, but sort of pop up in
And
your
then
mind more or less, right?
and then there are some words that some synonym is used
Hmm.
just to cover the whole point. Do you want to go fly, blah 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 blah, something like that, and you see it, it
Slash slash.
it's clearly it's a machine.
Yes, exactly, and it doesn't really care how you move. So, but it acknowledges that you need to be given these alternative choices. So then it just slash 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 all the
Yes.
different versions of how you can do something, and it's um. But then it also becomes very philosophical because live and die, and when there's a slash between contradicting terms, it's like, why is that? And that is a valid thing that Uman is trying to convey, right?
Yeah.
But we get this view of the AIs, and we understand at the end of the second book, we sort of realize that the ousters are maybe attacking, but the AIs are also attacking,
Mm.
and humanity is on the brink of just annihilation, but they still need to trust the AIs, and they do so until the very end, and to the detriment of themselves. So they put all their forces on Hyperion, all of their eggs in the proverbial basket, and they that has detrimental effects to them. And when we end, John Keats has somehow managed, when he's finally dead, right, to still move his character that is in the technocore, his AI persona, into the real world, onto the time tombs, and to perform an actual moving Rachel away, because Saul hands his child to the Shrike, and the child is removed from the Shrike by the John Keats persona. So Saul makes the wrong choice per se, but it is also the only choice he could make, because that child is then handed on and they come back out. And he sees that, Rachel is carrying more or less herself, giving the child back. And, and then they go into where he is again given the opportunity to let her grow up.
You just mentioned a very good point there. I mean, about choice, it's really philosophical when you think about it. He doesn't have a choice, just like people in life. And he finally gave up. It's actually about human being trying to resist this inevitable thing in life. But at the end of the day, he doesn't have a choice. But at the end, he had faith, because he sort of knows, or when you read it, that Rachel will be back. That's my suspicion, at least. And the suspicion was confirmed. But before we go on to that, imagine Dan Simmons was writing this in the 80s, or the book was released in the 1990.
Yep.
We don't know social media. We don't know how people can get addicted to it. But there is a scene when Lee Han was taking care of Joseph Severn, or at the time he is already called John Keats.
Yep.
Lee Han was depicted as somebody born in the future, where there are no sickness, so he doesn't know that people can get bleeding, all this primitive sickness of John Keats' era, while somehow the Cybrid sort of experience it in the future. And then at that time, somehow I think it was after the bombing or whatever, the connection to the data sphere or the megasphere is off. So Lee Han, I would imagine having a panic attack of not being online like people in the modern era. How should we do? I cannot function this way. Imagine it's in the 90s. Come on.
Yeah.
When
he has a literal. He tries to use his comlog and it doesn't work, and it's just, and it. This is I love that. They, in several parts of the book, we get told how people can use like a chip in their head to look up something. And John Keats, being a Cybrid, being an AI, can see, he says something to someone, he says his name, and then he can see the link, the data link appear, and he can see, oh, you're looking up who I am.
Yeah.
And you found the false information about me. And then they do that. And people are so used to it. And then when Lee Hunt is disconnected, he has a very Jen said no longer able to use his phone moment.
Yes.
Where he really doesn't know how to do anything. And it's just, and he has several moments where just the luxury of the future being removed from him, and he just doesn't know, and it just doesn't make sense. He just like that can't be. How is this even possible? But how can anyone live like this?
But the beauty of this, I talked with another colleague of ours, you know him, the one who got excited after my talk in FACDoc about sci-fi, and then we agree on Isaac Asimov. Isaac Asimov, Dan Simmons has been compared to Isaac Asimov somehow, but there are one thing that we agree about the book I, Robot, is that the style is so techy, that more concentrated on the technology than the human of it. So when
Hmm.
you read it, it becomes a very terse and dry explanation of ideas instead of full-fledged stories. And I think that differentiates Dan Simmons from that kind of writing because he doesn't describe that the technology is not exists or it's cut off, there is no flow of data. No, he described it from the reaction of the user, which is Lihan.
Yeah,
The panic attack, the anxiety of not knowing because I'm not connected to the data sphere or the megasphere. That's
yeah,
brilliant.
yeah. Exactly. And the AI sort of also gives or Keats, when he is put in a place where this connection no longer exists, the direct connection. He there is still, because the connection exists in this void that binds, which is sort of the connecting element between everything, a story point that just explodes in depth in the last two books. um he feels like he is like a singular application in a data farm, right? He is there. There's all this computing power, more or less, but he's all alone. There is nothing there. There are no more apps. There is nothing for him to connect up to. There is no Bluetooth, nothing, right? It's just click on the Bluetooth window and nothing shows up. And imagine picking up your phone and looking at it, and you have no cellular connection. There are no Wi-Fi's showing up on your list. The Bluetooth is blank. It's just like, when does that happen? It doesn't really happen unless you move really, really far into the reaches of just a
But
jungle, more or less.
But imagine if you read this in the 90s or in the 2000, you will, okay, this is not a big deal. But when you read it in 2025, having experienced all those, that paragraph with the scene with Lihan and
Yeah.
Joseph Safran is differently read.
I mean, yeah, and he sees that. Dan Simmons understands that that is what would happen in this world, and he does that like 20 some years before the iPhone shows up, right? It
Yeah.
is, and that is a very good example of the depth of his imagination, where he can go, how he can like build a story, because he understands what's going on. He understands Teilhard's
Yes.
religiosity, so he can explain that to us. He understands Abraham's sort of dilemma,
Mm.
and he can build a story around that. He understands the love between John Keats and Frances Fawny Braun, who are these two people in their early 20s. I believe she was like 18
Mm.
when they met, and he is like 25 and she's 20 when he dies. He goes, just like the Keats persona in the book, he ends up in Rome, in the papal state, actually, ironically enough, where he dies very slowly from consumption. Having my grandmother's grandmother, so my mother's mother's mother, died in 1905 from consumption in Bergen at the age of 23. So I feel that story very much there. She had two daughters, very much in love, and is just revoked from reality. And then, where is God in this, right?
Mm.
And all of that stuff. And uh, the the love story in this, and Dan Simmons's understanding of the love story between Keats and Braun. And I mean, this woman wore mourning clothes for 6 years after Keats was dead. She kept his poems, his letters. She collected items through John Severn and others with help from them. to store it. A big part of why we know Keats is Fanny Braun, right? She built this, and then when she died, even her children knew of this man that their mother loved so deeply before she met their father, and they helped sort of establish this yeah, keep the knowledge going and put it in a place where we now know of it, which says something about the love story in this. And all of this is intertwined in there. And I mean, we could spend another 2 hours talking about the details and still not cover so much of this. But one of the reasons I really love the Hyperion cantos, which, and especially the 2 secondary books, is we've had many talks about religion and things like that. They're very deep and wonderful conversations, where you've also given me very good insight into the religion that you grew up in. And still, I find myself very much a Teilhard Christian. I see the world as it is. If I were to be a god, I would create a small pinpoint and just let it go and see where it went. And sadly, that involves pain for your creation. And then we can then discuss, has God intervened at some points to help us, guide us? Where did he show up 4,000 years ago and then 2,000 years ago with explanations that they could understand? Like the New Testament is Judaism 2.0 explained for shepherds, right? Sheep shepherds in the Middle East. That is what it is. And all of these, it's very simplified. But I find that this religiosity is also, if you're atheist, if you're a deep believer, if you're agnostic, there is a philosophical bit here that touches everyone. Anyone finds something in it, and it doesn't push anybody aside, and it includes so much through Uman. We also have Buddhism and all of these things that show up. It is such a wonderful story of belief, of love, of sexuality, of war, of just living, of fear of losing your life, fear of living forever without purpose. It just builds and builds and shows humanity in such a wonderful way, in all that is good and bad within it. And that is a very philosophical and religious thing, as well as it is not. And it's such a vast array there. And that is sort of why I really wanted you as well to read all 4. And I want to pin it on. We all need to read all 4.
I know we are reaching our second hour now. I still have 2 points that I want to say. If you have 5 more minutes.
Oh yeah.
Yes. The first one, I want to respond to you. I mean, I was in a discussion with a friend a couple of days ago about this, that we as a human being need some kind of way to weave whatever we believe to become our love story. We call it narratives now. And like you said about this religiosity or not being religious or whatever, is actually just fulfilling the need to have this narrative. If you, for example, if you subscribe to a religion or an ideology, then you will get the template of narrative that you can just weave it into yours. Being not connected to that is that you have all the burden to create your own narrative. What kind of story you live life to, what kind of story you tell yourself about you. We do it one way or another. And then the beauty of reading stories is actually you got inspiration, which you can pick and choose of elements you like to put in your narrative if you are aware of there is a narrative. And that's basically part of the enjoyment of being a reader for me, because now I have lots of way to express something that I feel, something that I experience based on the thing that I pick up. And then knowing lots of characters, especially characters in these books, which not normally you find in your project or your work, then you'll even get more bibliography of characters. That's one thing.
Yep.
But another thing that we need to mention about the book is the prose is fucking beautiful. I want to say to you, I wanted to start this book is not good, Alexander. This book is fucking good. I sort of, you remember there is a scene, I forgot which one, when there is, I think Martin Saline is about to get to the tree where they see people was pinned down. And then suddenly there's a paragraph. Pain is like a structure, blah, blah, blah. Damn, this paragraph is beautiful. I know. I put yeah. In the book, page 268, book number 2. Pain, he discovers, has its structure. It has floor plan, blah, blah, blah. And then the analogy, the description is really beautiful and original. You haven't seen that pain described that way. I really appreciate that kind of inventiveness in a writer. And then
and it's so true, and I think that is sort of the levels in there, and I love the description you have of the narration. I believe that to build on that, I think in the modern world, a lot of people feel they need to find it and build it themselves in the lack of religion. I think many people with religion also have the challenge of dogma, where let's be face it, powerful men 200 years ago saw a challenge to their, or 2000 years ago, saw a challenge to their power, and they tweaked the text, or they said, no, you should understand this text this way. And that is so that they could remain in power. And I think a lot of the challenges with being a religious individual, and I'm not deeply religious, but I confirm my Christianity, but it's challenging dogmas. Because I don't believe many of the things where they say that God hates somebody for doing something, I don't think that is correct. I think that is us projecting into the text what isn't there. And being the son of a religious historian, I know that you can date the Bible by the changes made in the text. And we no longer read the text with the eyes of a person from 2000 years ago or 1600 years ago. You know, we read it as a modern person reflecting on our own time. And I think understanding the text has meant to be, it has been lost quite a lot. And it leaves many people with a certainty that is being challenged now. And a lot of people lose their religiosity based on it, and understandably so, because it's very yes or no, hell or heaven. And Simmons and Dure and Hoyt challenge this in a very beautiful way, where it's about humanity. And God is about humanity. And the AIs and Uman make it clear that living is also about existence, right? It's not, so in the humanity, it's about the existence. And the story that's told really, and especially Dure understands this or portrays it, is it isn't about the exam. It is about how you perform up until, it is about the school years. Right? That's where it is. And it doesn't really matter at the very end how
if you're an employer, you want the certificate.
Exactly, right? That is and good on them. I get it. but I think a lot of employers lose a lot of really good employees because they look at the wrong things based on the exams, and they don't see the person that came out of it. I think Dan Simmons tells a beautiful story. He picks up so much wonderful poetry, and he explains things in, yeah, like you said, in a way that shows that he has lived. And um, I hope that the people that aren't religious can find the same depth in those texts that I find in the non-religious ones, because I fear that people will read the religious parts as religious sort of preaching, which it isn't. It's just meant to make you think
I don't feel
and to
any
reflect on
preachiness
being
at
a good human.
I don't
Yeah,
feel any preachiness at all. He's very smart not to be trapped into that kind of way of thinking.
yeah.
uh, or the way of expressing or using language. Because the credo of writer is show, don't tell. He's not telling
Mm.
anything here because sci-fi often. I talk to people who doesn't like sci-fi so much because they tend to tell. This is how luck works, blah blah blah. Then you have to accept this. Okay, this is, and then you get like a documentation of HTTP. This is 404. Is this one? No, we know 404 because there's a character is using a 404 that way. Then we deduce, or what do you call it? That it means that thing. That's the way he's writing his book.
Yeah,
And on the lighter note,
exactly.
I have a sort of weird tendency with words. I have a sensitivity or weirdness about it. If you have the spinner, whatever, in the end, I use words to do that. So
Mm.
I think it was from a story when I was a kid, and the story used the word hegemony. So hegemonies have some hook in my mind, and then there is a hegemony in this book as well. And then in Norway, when I start to learn the language, the word that fascinate me until now because it is tilfredsstillende. How much does it take to express things? How many syllables it's there? And then one word that I pick up from this book right now is lapis lazuli. Do you
Really?
get it? It's
Oh,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
he used it several times when he mentioned the sky in Hyperion. It's lapis lazuli. Wow, what is that? It's a kind of blue.
Yeah. It is, and I mean, anybody who's played Minecraft knows lapis lazuli. It's funny that you mention it because cobalt blue is one of the things that the place where I live is known for. It
Oh,
had deep blue cobalt mines, which in old times was like the color, along with purple. It was
mm,
like that. It was so hard to get. But yeah, I think, but for me, what I really got out of it was a love for John Keats
mm.
and his poetry.
Oh, you started from
And
this book, not beforehand.
I had no knowledge of him beforehand at all. So yeah, but yeah, I've really enjoyed this talk with you. I've ranted on about so many things that sort of grow out of this. I
That's
think
fine.
the secondary part of all of this, where it sort of builds, you see why some of these things really stuck in my head. Um, the religiosity is just torn apart in the next book 3 and 4. So
Mm.
it's destroyed to be rebuilt, but I hope that, yeah, people will read it. It
Yeah,
is such a wonderful book.
we forgot to mention the Merlin sickness that Rachel. I think we can go deep into it because not now, I know, but Merlin sickness. I remember lots of things, and then he described it really well. How can people grow young and then die until the minutes? Yes.
Yeah,
There are so many things. So
That's
for
true.
people who happen to listen to us, I highly recommend this. I am a convert now from this. I never look down to sci-fi again. Sorry to say, but this is really beautiful. Thanks, Alexander, for
Thank you,
introducing
Emma.
me to this book. And I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I do. And I hope this is not the first or the last one. I think we should talk more.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. So it's been wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Nice. Bye bye, Alexander.
Bye bye.